This is the Arts Forum, a weekly meeting place for the discussion of new ideas in the avant-garde arts. Tonight's forum focuses on the art of film. Your host is P. Adam Sitney, co-director of the Anthology Film Archives in New York City, professor of cinema studies at New York University School of the Arts, and author of the book The Visionary Film. Here is P. Adams Sitney.
Good evening, and welcome to the Arts Forum. Tonight my guest is the filmmaker Babette Mangolte. Babette, what is What Maisie Knew?
Oh, it's actually the merger of two ideas. One which is represented by the title, What Maisie Knew. It's the title of a novel by Henry James. And the second one is a kind of portrait of a woman. I will first explain the second idea because it's by far the least important in the film. But when I arrived in New York...
The most important or the least important?
The least important. When I arrived in New York around 5 years ago, I've met several women, much more active it seems in New York than women were in France at the time. And some of them became my friend, and I was really interested by the kind of filmic presence of in particular 5 women. Then I decided to make a film about. And at the same time, I was interested in that novel of Henry James. So the meeting of the two make the film now. The novel of James... What?
Yes. I was going to say that for a reader familiar with the novel, What Maisie Knew, who would see your film for the first time would find something quite other than a conventional literary adaptation.
Yeah, it's not, but there are still main idea, which is in James' novel. It's the point of view of a single character on in a form which is not literary, a subjective form, but in a form which is a kind of translation of a subjective vision. So it's what was my interest in the book. And also the fact the perception, which is explained in the book, is coming from a child, a young girl of maybe 5 to 7 years old in the book. So I take that as the point of departure, the starting point of the film. Thinking then the camera will represent Maisie, so the camera will represent the child, which will be mainly looking at these 5 women that I was so interested in. And from then on, the film.
This poses some very interesting problems. That, for instance, in the novel, the entire structure of description can evoke the mentality of a 5-year-old child. In a way, doesn't the impersonality of the camera eye create certain kinds of problems in the representation of this kind of unique perspective?
Yeah, it's obvious then the vision is not represented by the camera. It's not a present vision. It's not the vision of a present time. It's a vision at the same time of certain event, which could be either present or past, and also the way the event were received by the person. So it's a real translation of the camera as not so much as the organ of vision, but as the organ of perception of knowledge by vision, let's say. So from then on, I go far away from the book because I have imagined that Maisie was much more outside of her environment in the film than she is really in the book. But I have kept the main interest of Maisie in the book, which is essentially the relation between the couple around her. In the book, for instance, the mother separated from the father, and both of them get involved with 2 other people which actually take more or less the place to favor their own affair, the place of the mother and the father, and accept Maisie as their own child. And after that the affair broke, and she's just at the end left at the responsibility of a governess. So that's really the book. So in the book, what actually Maisie know, it's how the sex life of the people around her are influencing her own surrounding. So I take that also as a principal thematic in the film, but not trying to keep any kind of continuity in the narration, because there are really no narration. There are just exchange of situation and variation of situation, which makes then, for the viewer, the situation are perceived as similar, but what actually perceived is the way they are perceived differently by the camera from the beginning to the end of the film. So what you have in terms of dramatic line, it's the evolution of the perception of Maisie as represented by the camera.
When I saw the film for the first time, among many things, I was struck by the way in which it seems to some extent a fusion of a good deal of advanced cinema in Europe with coming in contact, as you obviously did, with the American avant-garde film. There was a certain play of interest which created a rather uniqueness for this film. Perhaps you could tell us something about your development in Europe as a filmmaker, how you came to make films and your experiences there.
I did not came to make films in Europe. I came to work on film, or to be interested to work on film. So I just went to a film school, and as a woman, I was interested in camera work. As a woman, I had some kind of difficulty to integrate myself in the commercial field,
Where
in
was
the
the
industry.
school?
The school was Vaugirard, the École nationale de la photographie et de la cinématographie in France, in Paris. There was two film schools at the time. There was Lidec and Vaugirard, and Vaugirard was the more technically oriented. And
Were there other women in the school?
There was two other. The first year, the second year, they discontinued. I was the only one, and there was 29 men. We were 30. So I had not very big chance from the reaction of the teacher and even the student around me to get to make any kind of career as a camera person. But managed to survive a little bit by luck and a little bit by making money by doing editing. So I get actually forced by the circumstances to know not only technically speaking the work of the camera, but also the work of continuity and the work of production or assistant production and editor, essentially editor.
In Europe,
And
there's
I
always,
became-
excuse me, but has not always been sort of the fact that women have always, when they could find jobs in film production, often had been editors? I don't know why that is.
Yeah, particularly all the editors in France are women. There are very few men. Practically all the continuity people are women. And in the 60s, I mean, I went in school from 64 to 66, so I was out of school and looking for works. By the end of 66, there was one woman who was camera person on television, on school television, I mean, program of involving educational program, and that's about it. And I was refused to enter on television. They accept me only for animation. I did not want to do that. I was interested in doing either news or live action or, fiction film. So that was the only way I could have really worked steadily as a camera person. So the fact that it was really difficult makes that I had to do other jobs than camera work in film, which later on become very, very interesting. I mean, was a real benefit for me. I mean, was something very important because it makes me aware of really the totality of the process of filmmaking. First. Second, I also became more and more involved with people working more independently than in the industry, and essentially people who were able to give me work as a camera, risking me as a woman. They were not too sure. So I became more involved with kind of avant-garde scene over there.
I only know of the work of Marcel Hanoun, for whom you were camera person.
Yeah. I was
were there
also,
others?
yeah, but people who have not been doing anything really since then, and who have been doing one or two films, and that's it. So you don't know them. But essentially Marcel, then I meet for an editing job, actually, the first time, had not this kind of prejudice against women. He was also a camera person, and he was looking for an assistant for his...
Which film of Hanoun's was this? The first
the
one?
one I work on editing was L'Authentique Procès de Carl-Emmanuel Jung, and I went to work as an assistant camera and also helping him for the lights and the general camera work from 68 on. And the first film we done together was l'été, and after that followed the 4 seasons. I mean, l'été, l'hiver, le printemps, l'automne.
You worked on all of them.
Yeah. So certainly I work on this film not only because Marcel asked me, but also because I think at the time he was probably the most interesting filmmaker living in Paris.
Yes, I would agree. For those of our listeners who might not know the work, we're speaking of Marcel Hanoun, Hanoun, a rare example of a very independent French filmmaker working within a narrative tradition, but a narrative tradition distended to its severest limits. At Anthology Film Archives at various times, his film A Simple Story, Une Simple Histoire, and his film Spring can be seen. But otherwise his work is very little known in America. A Simple Story is distributed by New Yorker Films, but he is, in my mind as well, perhaps the most powerful filmmaker operating in Europe. And of course the conditions for the kind of radical independence that he wants to maintain in Europe are very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to either find audiences or find any funds to make feature-length narrative films there. What was it that brought you to America?
Oh, essentially after 68 in France there was a kind of reorganization total of the production, and for me a big change because I became there really involved in independent film. I realized after my training period then I was not at all interested like I was thinking I was in 64 when I entered school to work in the commercial industry. I mean, I had too good of a taste in terms of film that I wanted to see or wanted to work for to also accept to be involved in any kind of commercial filmmaking. So as a technician trained for doing certain kind of task, I was suddenly out of job by my own will because I did not want to work on these kind of things. So I drifted apart and managed to survive and decide also to know more about the independent filmmaking tradition existing in the state, and I had the good luck to meet people who helped me to do that. And I went here, and actually I arrived here in October 70, just a month before the opening of the archive on Lafayette Street, where I get the chance to see in 2 months period the whole main chef-d'oeuvre of the independent film of the 60s, essentially. So the discovery of Brakhage and of Andy Warhol and of Michael Snow and Kate Jacobs, and to just sit a few number of them were really very, very important for me. And at the same time...
Can I ask you a bit about this? Because it's an interesting phenomenon. Often one encounters European filmmakers, Hanoun is one example, who are very resistant at first to looking at the works of the American independent film. It seems to take a certain amount of adjustment or a large act of will. Mm-hmm. Was it at first a shock, or did you have that kind of resistance?
No, not at all. But I think because I did not see the film the same way, this kind of film the same way they were seeing it. And actually, even now, I don't react the same way. Essentially, I was somebody interested in camera work, and I was also interested in film, but I was not interested in film with kind of message or with kind of story. I mean, for me, the content of the film always be really subsidiary to the form of the film. And this film are so formal and are so inventive in their new form. It was essentially that I was struck by. Also, another discovery was the discovery of time. I mean, the discovery of the time of certain take, and the fact that that absolutely new structure of the time inside the film. Because even in the film of Marcel, where he had used in the 60s a very long take and so on, they all had a kind of function, dramatically speaking, or they were support of a text, for instance, or reading or whatever. But he had no time just to look at things where nothing is happening, like in Andy Warhol film, or things which are completely out of focus but just changing color, like Brakhage. I mean, this kind of liberty was just here, and I was absolutely fascinated by that. So it's a good deal the reason I stay in the state, to know that more from the inside than just to try to live here, because the environment what permit that kind of film to be done seems to be fit for me. And there was something else too. There was two other things actually: the language, and the second thing was the performance and the theater and the dance. Essentially, I discovered here modern dance. I mean, really modern dance.
What do you mean by modern dance?
I certainly don't mean Martha Graham. I mean Yvonne Rainer, Trisha Brown, and let's say the successor of Perth Cunningham and the Juston school of the beginning of the 60s. So I see actually the end of that school, which is surviving here in the 70s in New York. I mean,
because that is,
which
of course,
is called the structural dance.
Structural?
I will call it, but I don't know if they are really... but
because it does seem that that's an important factor. This kind of dance is an important factor in what Maisie knew.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, most of the way the actor and the presence is conceived, and the way the people are used in a space, and the way the space is represented, came just out of that word of performance, which I came to be interested by, and also to see very closely by my meeting with Yvonne Rainer and my work with her, and also by the fact then to make a living, I went to become a still photographer and make still photography of performance.
You mean your still photographic career began in America?
Oh yeah.
I hadn't realized that. I thought you were a still photographer.
No, I mean, when I arrived here after 2 months, I was out of money, so the only way I could survive was to work in a darkroom as a printer, as an assistant for a printer. So I became much better at still photography and at printing, and I started to be available to do still photography of performance. And also another factor was the theater of Richard Foreman, I suppose, also, which was a main revolution in my life. I mean, certainly.
At what stage did you encounter that?
Oh,
what
first
stage
month I was here.
What was playing?
He was preparing Total Recall. And it's actually because of the photograph I have done on Total Recall then, which was a play performed in December, January 71. Then I find a job in a darkroom and become a still photographer. So not only...
Several of those photographs have been published, have they not?
Yeah, and others will be...
In the Drama Review
and other will be published.
There's a book of Foreman's plays will be published by New York University Press, and I assume that you'll be illustrating that. Your photographs will be in that volume.
But to go back to the reason I stay here, and actually it's also at the time I was also thinking that I was really too ambitious to just stay a technician. The way I was thinking myself was just as a camera person, as a technician. In 71, I was thinking that actually I could do film myself. And in 72, I just started to think about making a film, which was what Maisie knew. But at the time in 72, I did not speak a very good English. Actually, the reading of the book of James was 15 years ago in a French translation. It's not only until 75 that I was able to read it in English. 72, 73, when I was starting to think on the film and to shot the first footage, which was shot in May 73, I did not have read the book in English yet. So
you actually hadn't made any other films on your own before What Maisie Knew?
No, I had produced with another friend of mine a film, but I was absolutely not interested in the direction of it. I was just interested. I mean, I was producing it to learn about camera, so I was doing the camera with that friend, and he was the one in charge of the direction.
At what stage had you begun to work as a cinematographer for Yvonne Rainer?
In 72.
That was on The Lives of the Performers.
Yeah.
It's a film which can be seen tomorrow night, that is Saturday night at Anthology Film Archives at 6.
The film, the photography of the film.
Was that an important experience in your development?
Very important. I mean, first by the meeting of Yvonne, which is probably one of the best artists, and probably also one of the only women artists living now and working since already a long time. By the fact then her idea in terms of film were very opening for me, and also for a more personal reason, by the fact that the photography I've done on that film was very successful, and so has been giving me a certain reputation as a cinematographer here, because from
Maybe-
2 years I have not been working on film. I mean, except from
I would be
going
interested
back
in
in
hearing
France.
something about the nature of that production, the kind of collaboration. Since you had a considerable amount of photographic experience, and that was virtually Yvonne Rayner's first film. She had, if I remember correctly, used some clips in dance
Yeah.
performances. It's a film that has a very distinctive visual style.
Yeah, the visual style actually come from the meeting of Yvonne and me, no doubts about it.
You
But
worked
there
this
are
out together.
Yes and no. I mean, Yvonne had written a script with certain idea of camera movement and certain idea of framing, which was actually translate with me in practical term. And I have a certain interaction in that, and I think there are certainly relation between that and also the work of Marcel Hanoun, for which I have been working. So I think there are continuity in their link, which is me. But Yvonne, I think, has never get enough credit for the invention in Life of a Performer in terms of quality of the photography. She usually give me all the credit, and I think she deserves some.
Because it's a film that has a remarkable kind of camera movement.
Yeah.
I hardly know of any film that is concerned simultaneously with the use of close-ups, and not with primarily facial close-ups, but movements of feet and hands at the same time, to sustain these close-ups in an almost continually weaving and reframing style. It's a unique visual form. That was in these notions were already in a script.
Pretty much, yeah.
And did the film follow a script?
Oh yeah,
All the way through?
definitely. Oh yeah. The thing I have actually really am more responsible for is the timing of the film, not the overall timing in terms of ordinance of sequence or in terms of sequence where the timing is the speech, for instance, or the text, but the timing of the camera movement is really mine. But this idea of movement, which is either following an action or not following an action, and the action go back where the movement has been, where the camera has been going in the space, is...
I'm not...
I mean, when the camera goes off a certain object and go off to the right, and the object come back
In
to
other
the
words,
right.
the camera predicts the movement of the...
For instance, this
the
kind of
figures.
thing. That's definitely something that Yvonne is very concerned about. And actually in a third film, which we have been starting the shooting of it, the film will not be complete before probably a year, there are similar things. It's
What
a
is
main
this film
preoccupation. It's just a working title. It's called Christina now, and there will be probably another title. Yvonne is not sure yet.
The first film was in black and white. Were they all three in black and white?
No, Life of Performer is black and white, film about who is black and white, but the third film of Yvonne will be color and black and white. And I think my second film, which I don't know the title either yet, will probably be also color and black and white, which was one of the main form of Marcel Hanoun, using
Yes,
black and white and
but
color.
In fact, when Hanoun is one of the few people, aside from yourself and Yvonne Rayner, who make long films in black and white now.
No, there are some
special
kind.
form.
Yeah, but it's not true. There are some kind of publicity things done in black and white, like in industrial film. I mean, commercial film, like.
No, I'm talking about
Bogdanovich film,
advanced filmmakers.
Oh yeah, that's
There's
true.
an overwhelming
Yeah,
tendency to use color now.
Yeah, which I really don't understand. I mean, because financially speaking, black and white is less expensive, and also it's so much more beautiful.
It has that is what one is struck with at first seeing Maisie No, especially white.
Yeah.
A certain glory of different degrees of fog and of light and of white curtains and white rooms. So there's a whole range of whiteness that
And like,
isn't accessible in color film, or it's hardly accessible in color film.
It's actually accessible if you want negative. It's very expensive. Actually, I want for my next film to do something which is very gradually going from black and white to color and vice versa. So I want to conceive some shot in which most of it will be black and white, and suddenly you will have a spot of color, just because the background will be black and white, for instance, so essentially gray. And suddenly somebody will enter in the frame, and that person will have a regular skin tone, but we will dress in gray, for instance, or things like that.
But don't you have a technical problem there? If in order to do so, you have to print it on color stock.
Yeah.
And color stock seems to diminish the tonal range of black and white to begin with.
That's true. Yeah, that's the main problem.
It's a real. I mean that it seems not simply to be the essence of using blacks and whites, but the tonal range of black and white filmic stock is so much
Actually,
greater.
what you will not get is not the same kind. You will get pretty much the same kind of white, but you will not get the same kind of black and of
Saturated
dark gray.
black.
Yeah. But for instance, in the film of Ivan, I mean, the black are very saturated and the white are very saturated, and there are very little middle range of gray because it's shot reversal. My film, on the contrary, they are essentially very different in light gray and white because the film is shot negative and also conceived differently. So it's very different in terms of
We were talking about
plastic quality.
the first film of Yvonne Rainer's, that is Lives of the Performers. You were also the cinematographer for her
The
second
second
film,
film,
The Story of a Woman Who, which will be shown tonight at 10 o'clock at Anthology Film Archives, and again tomorrow night, Saturday night, at 10 o'clock. Was there much of a different experience in filming and making the two films? They're very similar films
they are
to look at.
They are very similar plastically speaking. You mean for my work? I don't think so. I don't
My
think so
sense
at all.
of it was. Well, maybe.
I think they are very different because a film about a woman who is much more contrasty. It's much more black and white, and it's also in terms of time and in terms of overall conception, it's very different than the Afro Performer.
It seems to be
Which
further
was
away
done-
from the world of dance. Much
Yeah,
more,
definitely,
much
yeah.
more the film of someone who is a filmmaker rather than of a dancer at the stage of
Yeah, but
transition
Life
to
for
cinema.
Performer, something which was really unique is the fact that it was conceived like a dance concert. It was actually conceived as partly as
Well, both
a
films
film.
were they not? I saw a concert of Live.
Yeah, but that was very different. I mean, Life for Performer was really conceived by section, like a dance concert is conceived by accumulation of different pieces, solo piece and group piece and whatever. And the timing of each of these pieces are more or less decided in advance, and the way they intersect with each other is really loose in performance, never really defined. There could be a kind of small break or whatever, because the tension in performance is very different than in film. So in Life of Performer, you have this kind of sense of different section, and still the film is very much a film, but it's a film which as a main topic, the different use of different sense of time, let's say, for each sequence. And film about a woman who is much more about continuity of a certain kind of message and story.
Did any of this dance structuring affect you in the way you conceived of Maisie?
I don't think so, because actually Maisie is conceived really like a very continuous film. There are no break in terms of pacing, and I was very interested because I'm fascinated by Hitchcock, by this idea of constantly sustain the attention and the kind of suspense of a viewer. So
can you elaborate on that?
Yeah,
From
I
Hitchcock?
think there are.
Because I wouldn't think of Hitchcock when I saw your film at all.
I don't think anybody will think about that, but because it's so different in terms of idea. But in terms of timing, there are this constant waiting in the film of what will be happening at the beginning. There are all this setup of the fog scene, and after that the door, which are half open, and you don't really know what to expect. And the sound of it, which is very repetitive and use kind of overlap of sound, indoors, outdoors, and outdoors, indoors. So most of the sound which you have when you see an indoor shot are actually sound which you will find more likely outdoors, like winds or things like that. So you have a constant suspense, it seems to me, which not at all exists in the film of Iran.
This is P. Adam Sitney for Arts Forum. I'm talking this evening with filmmaker Babette Mangolte, the maker of What Maisie Knew, a film that will be playing in just some hours from now at 8 o'clock at Anthology Film Archives, 80 Worcester Street, and again tomorrow, Saturday night at 8 o'clock at Anthology Film Archives. You mentioned sound. Your film is quite committed to an elaborate use of sound.
Yeah, elaborate, but actually very simple. Very, very
How would you
simple.
describe it?
Oh, the sound is so simple. They just have a variation of a very limited number of sound. There are wind, there are doors closing and opening, creakings of doors. There are whistle, the whistle of a teapot and the whistle of a subway train. And there are some kind of rumble of crowds in the subway too, and indoors, which are made by the actual performer. And that's about it. And there are also piano.
I vividly remember
And there are
a
also
bathtub
music.
scene in which
And
the
there's some
sound,
water.
the sound
Yeah.
of the water splashing is remarkably anticipates the actual scene in the.
Yeah, and there
bathroom.
are some water, yeah. So the sound, the water is because it's representative of dream of the mother. The door, it's representative of the suspense. When a door open or close, you always expect to find something new or unexpected. The whistle, just because it's kind of a tense sound, and the wind, because it's also very tense. So there are very little sound, which each of them have their own impact in terms of emotion, let's say. Each of them are placed realistically in the film, in confront with some image in which it's normal to have a door opening or closing, but also it's not. So you don't see any door, it's just an empty space, and you have a door open, for instance, or closing or creaking of a door. The same for the whistling, the same for the wind, and so on. So the fact the sound has been explained in a realistic, at a realistic level, for at one instant in the film, and is displaced later on, maintain that sense of continuity and maintain that sense of suspense and of unity of the character of the camera.
But this attitude towards
That
sound
would be
is
one of the
is
things. And there
is
are also the piano, which is a series of variation on a piece, which is also a variation on a theme by Schumann. And the pianists are not playing that very well, so the variation are on the way to play it. So there are this kind of game of music which is not very well played, and how it's fit on the image and so on. It's very, the relation with the sound and the image, it's never, the way it sync with an image is never carry on for very long. So you have constant disruption of a kind of rhythm of the synchronization of sound and image all along the film, which makes then the relation between the two and the way you hear the music change, because the first time you hear the music it's very flat, it's just a record and you just see an image on the screen, which is the legs of a woman, and after that the hand and the arms or whatever, it's very formal. The second time it looks like it's three doors closed, and it seems then the piano came from the three doors, but there are kind of breaks, so it became really intentional and very ironic. The third time it's used as a comment on an action, and it's the rhythm of the music is used as a comment on action, which is also very ironic, and so on and so on. So the relation between sound and image is quite simple, but each time is different, which makes actually for the kind of intensity, let's say, of the film. It's the thing I'm more happy about it, and I think it's the more original for my part, and the things we have been giving me the more pleasure to find out.
It's interesting that it would be in the area of sound when you describe yourself as initially a camera person.
Yeah, but the idea of the film, it's an idea of a camera person, the camera being somebody, and the camera maintaining a certain level of vision, a certain consistency in the way things are seen. It's in there, then you find me as a camera person, but in that film I'm not only a camera person, I'm also the filmmaker. So.
But in America in general, one doesn't find this kind of commitment
because
to sound.
it's very expensive, and because also you need a kind of long practice in editing, which fortunately I get, which go back to the beginning of that interview, and also essentially.
I wonder if it's only economical, because when one thinks of independent filmmakers deeply committed to elaboration of sound, someone like Peter Kubelka, again, who is an Austrian, is a good example. It's only very recently, it's only in the 70s that some of the major American filmmakers have began to use anything but the most monomorphic kinds of sound. I'm thinking of an example of a film where you were at least partially the cinematographer.
Oh,
It's
Rameau's Nephew. Yeah.
Rameau's Nephew, one of the most remarkable films of the last few years. Almost 5-hour long film about, I would say, language or sound manifestations by Michael Snow.
Essentially about relation between image and sound.
Yeah.
But in terms of the content of the sound, in terms of what the sound represents, I mean, it seems that.
What was it like to work on that film?
Oh, it was very, very interesting because it went very fast, and also because for me, I had a lot of leeway. I mean, Michael had set up a certain framing of work and had a certain restriction in terms of camera, but I had also a lot of independence.
Can you give me some examples? Because the visual style looks so different from almost anything else I've seen that you shot.
Yeah, that's true, because there was no time really to relight every shot. So there was a main lighting setup. I mean, I'm mainly best at light, and it's what the things I'm more interested in. I'm kind of interested in camera movement and camera framing. But for my own pleasure, as a cinematographer, I'm mainly interested in lighting a space and putting people inside of it and lighting them. So for that respect, in the film of Michael, it was kind of rough because we were supposed to shoot a sequence of 45 minutes in a day. So the light was organized for the 4 main camera axes and what planned in advance, and that's it. From then on, I was using a zoom and reframing each thing. On certain cue, there was a script indicating where the cut will be, so, and I knew I had to reframe closer or further away or to include that object in it or whatever. But what was very interesting for me is to see how relaxed Michael was, and I think it's how I measure actually very primitively the level of interest of somebody I'm working with. It's how relaxed they are in their work and how
in other words, you enjoy working the most with the filmmakers who are the most relaxed?
Obviously. Because I get more pleasure out of it.
Is Yvonne Rainer relaxed when making films?
Yeah, she is very relaxed.
And Hanoun? I wouldn't imagine
in a very different way. I mean, he has a kind, let's say, relaxed and also getting pleasure out of the work, essentially.
Which
don't always go with relaxed.
Because it would seem to me that making films is a particularly nervous experience, because as the camera rolls by, money is rolling in every instance. There's this question of catching it or not.
Yeah, but you don't have to care about that. I mean, when what I call relaxation is maybe not a good word. It's more the kind of intensity you get each time the camera is rolling by, like you say. The fact then what you get in the camera is just great. I mean,
I was struck by that actually in the case of Snow, because I did, as you know, a tiny bit part near the end of the film, and the degree to which he seemed to be enjoying himself while making the film seemed rather remarkable. The lack of worry.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually that kind of liberty and that kind of closeness to film than I discovered by looking at the independent filmmaking world here. I mean, in a more commercial situation, everybody thinks about money, and particularly the technician thinks about their paycheck. They don't think about money waste in the camera and by the money waste in labs. But it's only that, so the work just becomes very tedious, especially when you have to shoot. It's just not interesting, add to it. But when you work with interesting filmmaker, there are a sense of certain freedom. No matter what's happening in the camera, even if there are mistakes, you feel that you will be able, in a way, to use it. That was the great theory of Marcel.
No matter what happens?
More or less, even if there are mistakes, you can integrate them later on in the film.
Did you find that to be the case in What Maze You Know?
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh yeah. I purposely integrate out of focus shot, for instance, and things that I've done really shot on the spur of the moment, and I have used, and I was sure I would never use them. I was just doing them to make pleasure to myself and so on. Oh yeah. Even if the film was kind of prepared.
There's one particularly hilarious scene that I would suspect might have emerged that way, and that is the scene in which Richard Foreman crawls through the...
Actually, no, it's not at all
that. Was part of the script? Because
it was not part of the script, but it just at the time I was
It's a
thinking,
hilarious scene.
there was never a script of the film. I mean, the film was shot in a one and a half year period. So I have conceived some sequence, especially a sequence related to a space, a year before the end of the film was conceived. So the things were attached to each other all along the time I was working on it. And the reason for that time was essentially the money problem. I was just using my saving to do the film. So when I had some money, I was able to shoot. So I was able to conceive what to shoot. So that sequence, which is outside and pretty much in the middle of the film, and which play now as a kind of hinge of the film, that going to a door which is closed with a lot of effort of Richard, it's a subway door, is actually there because I just saw that incident in the subway, and it was really very frightening.
Oh, you actually saw a person?
Yeah, and it was really
the...
frightening because there was no reason to go under that door. There was another way to catch the train because I was in the same situation. I was about also to open that door when I knew there was another way. So I saw the event and I decided it was interesting and I should,
But in the
do
result,
it. And in the result, I mean, Richard seems to be the good person to do it because he has some free time. He's a good friend of mine, so he did not mind to spend half an hour for me. But the way he was doing it was so hilarious. I was laughing and I was handling the camera, so the camera is shaking like crazy because I'm laughing.
Well, he's a hilarious mimic.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided to keep the sequence because before that, in the main space, the apartment in which Maisie is supposed to live, you have all these doors opening just by miracle. So in the middle of it, that sequence of a man struggling to go through a door which is closed was kind of even more funny. And also for the sound and so on.
I don't recall the sound from that scene. It's an
It's
actual
the
sound?
whistle. It's the sound of the subway. It's the whistle of the train, and at the same time the feet of people running down the stairs. It's actually the sound of the location, the exact sound of the location, which was interesting because it just, for me, I mean, I had think of the sound before. It was just a kind of mixing of all the sound I had earlier in the film, whistling and feet and sense of crowd.
In our last minute, I wonder if you would like to say anything about the film that's in the planning stage now, your new film?
Oh.
Perhaps not.
Yeah, no, I would like to. I mean, it probably will never be like what I say now because I will be changing. If the film is not finished between 3 or 4 years, I will have time to change everything. But as it stands now, it has to do with, again, a camera person, but this time the camera person is an adult, it's me, in other way, and he is a still photographer. So he has to do with somebody making still photography and also somebody being a woman living in New York. So he has to do at the same time with framing still of either people, portrait, or performance event and space, and also walking in the street of New York and framing the people you look when you see in the street, essentially for self-protection.
Would you be using any of the same people you used before?
Yeah, roughly, but I will have much more people. I mean, we will just appear for 2-3 shots, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There will be no main really leading character like, but I'm not too sure yet about that, like in the other one. I think there will be in the film also a kind of narrative anecdotes. I mean, the reference to a novel, also by Henry James, that nobody will know, The Beast and the Jungle, which is a fabulous novel. I think every listener to that radio talk should read that novel. The
Beast in the Jungle?
Yeah.
At this point,
it's a short story, actually.
I think we're going to have to terminate. I've been speaking to Babette Mangolte, filmmaker of What Maisie Knew. Tonight, this is P. Adam Sitney for the Arts Forum. In the remaining minutes, I would like to play a bit of the music that Babette Mangolte mentioned, Schumann's Etude Symphonique, as part of the score used for her film, What Maisie Knew. We'll be playing from the third etude, Vivace.